I'm going to start this morning by talking about some Bible stories that you probably know. Jesus had been out teaching, and he was teaching on a hillside, and there were about 5,000 people plus there. And the day was getting late, and the disciples came to Jesus and said, hey, you need to send these people away because they need to go eat, and we don't have anything. Jesus said, you feed them. And how did the disciples respond? What? How? We have no way to do that. And Jesus took their very little and made it a lot. And he fed the whole 5,000. Well, then later on, Jesus was teaching again. And this time there were about 4,000 people. And again, it was getting late, and Jesus looked out, and this time he had compassion on the people. And he said, I don't want to send them away. He tells the disciples, I don't want to just send them away because they might faint on their way home. In other words, they might be so hungry that they don't make it home. And so he says to the disciples, so give them something to eat. And what was their response? You might expect them to be, oh yeah, remember he did this once before? But what was their response? It was the exact same thing. What? How are we supposed to do that? And Jesus again takes very little and makes a lot. You see, the disciples' limited resources was not a challenge for Jesus. And the problem there in the situation is that they didn't figure that out. And the disciples had the chance to learn it, but they didn't. They didn't get it. That their limited resources were not a challenge for Jesus. But the thing is I don't think that disciples are much different than many people. I think a lot of us are that same way. We just don't learn it. We don't get it. You see, we tend to focus on what's right in front of us. We tend to focus on what we can see, and then we act upon that. But we could act in faith. We could know that God is able to do anything and act in faith, knowing that God has no limitations. Well, in our passage today, it contrasts two men, Saul and Jonathan. And one acts in faith, knowing that God can do anything. The other acts out of self-interest and from his limited human perspective. And so today, as we come into chapter 14, we're picking up where chapter 13 left off. So quick review from last week, where chapter 13 left off. Jonathan had begun a conflict with the Philistines by going out and attacking that Philistine garrison, the outpost in Gibeah, or near Gibeah. And so Jonathan had gone and attacked them, and then obviously the Philistines were upset about that, and they came back to attack Israel. So Jonathan, though, we found out, did what his father was supposed to have done as king. And if we remember that when he was made king, anointed king, he was commissioned to save Israel from the Philistines, or deliver Israel from the Philistines. But Saul had done nothing. For years, he didn't do it. And so now Jonathan has kind of kick-started things here. The Philistines have gathered together this huge army. And you remember they were fully equipped. It was like the number, they were innumerable because they were like the sand of the seashore. They also had horse riders, horsemen, what are they called? Soldiers who ride on horses. And they also had chariots. They were fully equipped and battle ready. Israel, on the other hand, had 600 scared men. And only 2 of those men had real weapons. What we saw last week is that Saul had disobeyed God. And in his disobedience, he failed to get the instructions from God through Samuel that he had expected to get. But he didn't get any instructions from Samuel. Why? Because after Samuel had scolded him for disobeying God, Samuel left. He just went away. And so now Saul, the king, doesn't know what to do. But Jonathan has a plan. So look at verses 1 through 5. We'll begin here, verses 1 through 5. Chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. It says, "One day, Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who carried his armor, 'Come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison on the other side.' But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah in the pomegranate cave at Migron. The people who were with him were about 600 men, including Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord of Shiloh, wearing an ephod. And the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. Within the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistine garrison, there was a rocky crag or cliff, a rocky crag on the one side and a rocky crag on the other side. The name of the one was Bozez and the name of the other Seneh. The one crag rose on the north in front of Michmash, and the other on the south in front of Geba. And so here we have Saul. He's camped out with his army around Gibeah. And the priest is with him, we're told. That the priest is with him. But who is this priest? The guy goes through this long list of names. He's a descendant of Eli. Now this is pretty ironic. Because here we have Saul, who had just been told by Samuel the prophet that he would not have a dynasty because of his disobedience to God, that his sons would not rule as kings after him. That he would not have a dynasty. And then we have this priest who was from a line of priests. He's descended from Eli, who was judged by God for what? For disobeying God. So we have both Saul and the priest who are both they're both under God's discipline. They've both been rejected by God in this sense. So is this good leadership? No, not really. But we're told here that the priest was wearing the ephod. This is important because the ephod is what they would use to consult God, to ask God, should we do this, or should we go forward, or should we stop, those kinds of things. They would use the ephod to do that. And so, most likely, Saul had the priest come with him because he got no instructions through Samuel. And he still doesn't know what he should do, so he had the priest come so he can ask God what to do through the priest. So he's still wanting some direction. And this may sound good. We may think, well, that's good of Saul to do. But in reality, it demonstrates his lack of faith and his lack of obedience to God. Because God has already told him what he needs to do. He was made king, he was anointed king, and commissioned to go and deliver Israel from the Philistines. And so here's the opportunity in front of him. He's saying, what should I do? Well, isn't it obvious? You should obey what you've already been told. But now, this conflict has finally started through Jonathan, not through Saul, but through Jonathan. And Saul should be moving forward, but he's just sitting there and waiting. But while Saul and the army are sitting around waiting, Jonathan decides to go on the offensive. He's going to go over to the Philistines. He says to his armor bearer, let's go. And so they say, okay. He's not going to just sit around and wait for something to happen. He's going to go. But we're specifically told here that what he didn't tell his dad. Now, probably because he thinks if he tells Saul what he's doing, then Saul will tell him not to go. He would stop him from doing it. And so Jonathan and his armor bearer, they go without anyone knowing. And they go across and they climb up a cliff to get to where the Philistines are. Let's keep reading verse 6 and 7. It says, Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few." And his armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Do as you wish. Behold, I am with you, heart and soul." Okay, so now we learn Jonathan's plan. He's not going over just to scout things out. He's going over there to attack the Philistines. And so when he does this, he's not being arrogant, like, "Look at me, I'm so great, I can do this all by myself." He's not being arrogant. He's not trying to make himself out to be the hero. But he's going, and all of his confidence is in God. Because he knows that God is able to do anything. He's able to give them victory, whether there's many soldiers or just a few. You see, God is not limited by the limits of our resources. And Jonathan knows that. But notice also that when Jonathan says this, that God can give us the victory, what does he say? He says, let's go over there, because God may do this. He says, it may be that he allows us to have this victory. Perhaps God will do this. You see what Jonathan's doing there? He totally believes God can do this. He trusts that God is able to do anything, but he's not being presumptuous as if God has to do this for him. So God is able to do this, and if he chooses to, he will. So Jonathan doesn't know for sure if God will do it, but he knows that he can do it. And he's trusting God, and he's willing to go over there and take whatever comes, whatever God chooses to do. You know, that's interesting, because I think a lot of times we want to wait around until we have all the answers. Until we know for sure, is this what God's going to do? I know he can, but is it what he'll do? You see, we don't have to know exactly what God will do. We don't have to know exactly what will happen before we follow God in obedience or in faith. The other striking thing I see here in this verse is that the armor bearer is totally willing to follow Jonathan. You see, Jonathan's faith has moved his armor bearer to follow him without any hesitation. And I say that, faith is contagious. When someone follows God in faith and exhibits great faith, others are encouraged to live in faith as well. Faith is contagious. It encourages others to trust God as well. Well, let's keep reading verse 8. Then Jonathan said, "Behold, we will cross over to the men, and we will show ourselves to them. If they say to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand still in our place, and we will not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hand, and this shall be the sign to us." So this is Jonathan's plan. He says, we're going to go over there, we're going to climb up this cliff, and when we get to the top of the cliff, they're going to see us, and depending on what they say, we'll know whether or not God is going to give us the victory. If they say, "Hey, we're coming to you," then we know that God hasn't decided to help us. But if we get to the top and they say, "Get over, come here," then we know God has given us the victory. So he says, this is the plan, that will be the sign. Verse 11, so both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines, and the Philistines said, "Look, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden themselves." They're mocking the Israelites here. Because remember last week we read that the Israelites were so scared that they were hiding under rocks and in holes, and even in cisterns and even in tombs. And so they're here saying, "Look, they're popping up out of their holes that they're hiding in." They're making fun of them. Verse 12, and the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, "Come up to us, and we will show you a thing." In other words, come here, we'll teach you a lesson. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hand of Israel." Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet, and his armor-bearer after him. And they fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer killed them after him. At that first strike, which Jonathan and his armor-bearer made, killed about 20 men within, as it were, a furrowed length in an acre of land. So just in this short area, they killed 20 men. But what he's saying is that Jonathan knocked him down, so he became incapacitated, and the armor-bearer came behind and finished him off. Verse 15, and there was a panic in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. The garrison and even the raiders trembled. The earth quaked, and it became a very great panic. So the Philistines, when this happened, the Philistines panicked. And my version says that it became a very great panic. Now that phrase is literally, it became a God panic. Now some people take that as a superlative, like my translation has here, a very great, like a God-sized panic. But it may be more straightforward to understand it as a panic that is caused by God. So a God-caused panic. But either way, this is a huge panic, and it is caused by God. And so God brings them to this place of panic. And we know that this is God's doing. He brought it on because he is helping Israel. Verse 16. It says, and the watchmen of Saul in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude was dispersing here and there. Then Saul said to the people who were with him, count and see who has gone from us. And when they had counted, behold, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. So Saul said to Abijah, bring the ark of God here, for the ark of God went at that time with the people of Israel. Now while Saul was talking to the priests, the tumult in the camp of the Philistines increased more and more. So Saul said to the priests, withdraw your hand. Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and went into the battle. And behold, every Philistine's sword was against his fellow, and there was very great confusion. And so the watchmen suddenly notice that something's happening in the Philistine camp. There's this big commotion, and the people are moving all over. You can imagine seeing them like moving like waves or whatever. There's something dramatic happening down there in the camp. This huge army was dispersing. The word is literally melting. So this is a picture of them like melting and running away. And when Saul sees this, he assumes that someone from Israel must have gone down there and started an attack. And so he says, who is it? And so they look around and they count, and they find out that Jonathan, his son, is missing, along with the armor bearer. You see, what we see here is Saul is actually losing his grip as king. Not only is he sitting here waiting, saying, I don't know what to do, but he doesn't even know what's happening in his own camp. In fact, his own son is gone. But at this point, Saul has to make a decision. He said, there's this commotion. We've got to do something. So, once again, Jonathan has started what Saul should have. But Saul is still not ready to go. And so he says, come here. He calls the priest over and he says, bring the ark here. And he wants to consult God, ask God, what should I do? He isn't sure, so he wants to ask what to do. But then he quickly changes his mind because he looks down and sees the tumult getting bigger and bigger. The commotion is getting bigger and bigger. And finally he says, forget it. We just got to go. He tells the priest, he says, withdraw your hand. That means stop asking. We just got to move. You see, Saul here is totally conflicted. He can't move in faith. But then he moves just simply because the situation in front of him dictates it. We gotta go. And so they go down and they find the Philistines killing each other. Sound familiar? Story of Gideon? We talked about it a few months ago. When Gideon went down and I believe it was the Midianites, when they got up and there was confusion and they were scared and they started killing each other. So what's happening again? That huge army, they turn their swords on each other. So Israel didn't have proper weapons, but apparently they didn't need it. Because God took care of it. Well, let's keep reading verse 23. Excuse me, 21. It says, now the Hebrews who had been with the Philistines before that time, and who had gone up with them into the camp, even they also turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. So apparently there were some Israelites who had defected from the army, who now that the Israelites have the upper hand, they turn around and say, oh, well, let's fight for Israel again. Likewise, verse 22, likewise, when all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were fleeing, they too followed hard after them in the battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed beyond by faith. Now here's the key statement of what we just read. So the Lord saved Israel that day. It wasn't Jonathan. It wasn't Saul. It wasn't the Israelite army. But it was God. Jonathan acted in faith, and then God gave them the victory. But now the attention will turn again to Saul. And the joy of this victory that they just had, and the prospect of further success, is hampered by the foolishness of a self-centered man. Look at verse 24. It says that the men of Israel had been hard-pressed that day. So Saul had laid an oath on the people, saying, cursed be the man who eats food until it is evening, and I am avenged on my enemies. So none of the people had tasted food. And so Saul made the men of the army, the Israeli army, take a vow. Take a vow that they wouldn't eat until evening, until the battle was over. Now this was pretty foolish, because anyone knows if you're going to go into a battle and fight, you need your strength. You need to be able to eat, because otherwise you're going to be weak and you're going to wear out and you're going to be tired. So this is kind of a foolish thing to do. But the biggest problem with this vow is that is Saul's ultimate goal in this vow. Why did he want them to take this vow? He says, nobody eat until I have been avenged on my enemies. You see, Saul was making this vow because he wants personal vengeance. He's not seeking God's honor. He's not seeking the protection of the people. He's all about himself. You see, he's self-seeking and he's concerned only with his own honor. And in his selfishness, he's made a really bad decision and made the people take this vow. And so at this point, we see that Saul stands in stark contrast to Jonathan, who, by the way, would have made a good king. It's kind of ironic, kind of sad in a way, because Saul has ruined that for his son Jonathan. Jonathan would have been a good king. But he'll never be king because of Saul's disobedience. But Saul, on the other hand, let me read to you what one person said about Saul. He says, the man who did not obey God in chapter 13 now made no reference to God, expressed no confidence in God, and was obsessed with avenging himself on his enemies and coercing his people into supporting him. It's all about him. Let's keep reading verse 25. So now when all the people came to the forest, behold, there was honey on the ground. And when the people entered the forest, behold, the honey was dropping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. So their fighting continues. They get to a forested area, and there's honeycombs, and it's actually dripping. The honey is literally dripping and falling onto the ground. So there's honey everywhere that people could eat, but no one does because of the vow. Verse 27, but Jonathan had not heard his father's charge. His father charged the people with the oath. So he put out the tip of the staff that was in his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes became bright. In other words, he ate a little, and it strengthened him, it energized him. He was like, it revitalized him. He was ready to go. Verse 28, then one of the people said, your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, cursed be the man who eats food this day. And the people were faint. Then Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. See how my eyes have become bright because I tasted a little honey? Jonathan understands that was a foolish vow to take. He said, because it's good for you to eat. He says, how much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies that they found. For now the defeat among the Philistines has not been great. That's interesting. Jonathan's saying, it could have been better. If people had strength because they had eaten, this victory could have been greater. But he says, but it's not been great. It's just been, sure, we won, but it hasn't been a great victory. Verse 31, they struck down the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ajalon, and the people were very faint. The people pounced on the spoil and took sheep and oxen and calves and slaughtered them on the ground, and the people ate them with the blood. So here's the thing. It gets to the end of the day, it's evening, and the battle has progressed to the point where they can eat, and they are so hungry, they're so famished, that they just start grabbing the animals that were left behind by the Philistines and start just cutting them open and eating them. They're not draining the blood. What's the problem with that? The Old Testament law says you don't eat animals with their blood. You drain their blood. The reason for that was to show respect for life. But the Old Testament law says you don't do that. Verse 33, then they told Saul, behold, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood. And he said, you have dealt treacherously. Roll a great stone to me here. And Saul said, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, let every man bring his ox or his sheep and slaughter them here and eat. And do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood. So every one of the people brought his ox with them that night, and they slaughtered them there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar that he had built to the Lord. So Saul's actually doing something good here. He's telling the people, don't sin against God. So this is actually a positive we see about Saul. And we're told here that he builds an altar for God as well. So he worships God. Verse 36. Then Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until the morning light. Let us not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatever seems good to you. But the priest said, let us draw near to God. So Saul wants to continue the battle. He says, it's nighttime, they won't be expecting it. Let's just go down and we'll continue it. And we'll take everything and we'll wipe them out. And the army says, okay, let's do it. But the priest says, well, let's ask God first. Verse 37, and Saul inquired of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. So we asked God, but God's not speaking. And Saul said, come here, all you leaders of the people, and know and see how this sin has arisen today. So when Saul realizes that God is not answering, he assumed there's something wrong. There must be some sin in the camp. There's a reason why God is not answering our requests or our questions. So he says, let's figure this out. Verse 39, for as the Lord lives who saves Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. But there was not a man among the people who answered him. And so here continues his foolishness. You see, he adds a specific to the vow. Now whoever is found guilty is to be put to death. Before it was kind of vague. It was a cursive. So in other words, God could curse and do what is right. Now Saul makes it very clear. Whoever is guilty is to be put to death. Now the thing is that some of the soldiers, they knew about it, but nobody said anything. Verse 40. Then he said to all Israel, you shall be on one side, and I and Jonathan, my son, will be on the other side. And the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. Therefore Saul said, O Lord God of Israel, why have you not answered your servant this day? If the guilt is in me or in Jonathan my son, O Lord God of Israel, give Urim. But if the guilt is in your people Israel, give Thummim. And Jonathan and Saul were taken, but the people escaped. Then Saul said, cast a lot between me and my son Jonathan. And Jonathan was taken. So they're using these things called the Urim and the Thummim, which were basically two stones that were kept in that ephod, the priest wore that we talked about earlier. And there were two stones that were different, and they could ask God like a yes or no question and say, well, if it's a Urim, then it's yes. If it's a Thummim, it's no. Or a question like this. If it's Saul and Jonathan, then it's one stone. If we pull out the other stone, then it must be the rest of Israel. And so the priest would reach into that ephod and pull out one of the stones. And whichever stone it was, it told them God's answer. This was a way that God had set up. This isn't just a superstitious thing, but God had told them to do this. And so it was a way he had set up for them to ask him or consult him about things, and that he would answer them this way. And so this was what happens, and they do it, and they find out that it's Jonathan. The problem is with Jonathan. Verse 43 says, then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. And Jonathan told him, I tasted a little honey with the tip of the staff that was in my hand. Here I am, I will die. And Saul said, God do so to me, and more also. You shall surely die, Jonathan. Then the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has worked this great salvation in Israel? Far from it. As the Lord lives, which is a way of making a vow, as the Lord lives, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. So the people ransomed Jonathan so that he did not die. Then Saul went up from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. And so Saul confronts Jonathan. What did you do? Now we already know what Jonathan did. But we also know what Jonathan thought about his dad's vow that he made him take. That it was foolish. And as Jonathan answers his dad, his answer kind of implies that he still feels the same, that this vow was kind of foolish. And that he feels that he hadn't done anything really worthy of death. Because what does Jonathan say? He said that he tasted, not, I ate, but I tasted, in other words, just a little. I tasted a little honey with the tip of my staff. In other words, I barely did anything. I tasted a little honey. It says that he's saying, this is so small, this is really nothing. But then he says, here I am, I will die. And I think Jonathan's being sarcastic. Kind of like, here I am. Okay, I'll die. If I have to. He seems to be sarcastic here. And part of the reason why I think this is because look at Saul's response. How does he respond? He says, but you will die. Kind of like Saul, like Jonathan's kind of blowing it off like this isn't a big deal. But Saul says, yes, it is, and you're going to die. Today, you're going to be put to death. But the people, the Israelites, they have a better view of what's happened that day than Saul does. And they pronounce their own vow that Jonathan should not be harmed. You see, because they say it's obvious that God has worked with Jonathan today. It's obvious that Jonathan acted in faith and that God has used him to save Israel. He's clearly on God's side here, and God has worked through him, so he shouldn't be harmed. We're told that they rescued Jonathan from Saul. And then the last verse we read says simply, and they went home. Saul went home. He didn't continue to pursue the Philistines. Remember, that's how this all started? Let's keep going. That's when a greater battle, a greater victory. But he goes home. He didn't continue to pursue the Philistines. They all go home. The Philistines go home to fight another day. In fact, that's what they'll do. They'll fight many more days. The Philistines will continue to be a great problem for Israel. There will continue to be great conflict between the Philistines and the Israelites for years to come. On the other hand, this could have been a decisive victory. But in the words of Jonathan, it was only a small victory. So as Jonathan had said, it wasn't as good of a victory as it could have been. You see, if Saul had acted in faith, it could have been better. And that's true for us. Things can be better if God's people act in faith. So are you more like Jonathan or Saul? It's kind of an in-your-face question. Are you more like Jonathan or Saul? A person of faith or foolishness? You see, Saul knew what God had told him to do, but he didn't do it. You know what that is? Foolish. Saul was most concerned with himself, his own safety, his own honor. I mean, don't get me wrong. Saul he definitely did have times of worship. But then he would turn around and disobey God. It was almost as if his worship was kind of like a mask that hid his true heart. You see, Saul was very half-hearted. He had a half-hearted commitment to God. He would kind of go through the motions of worship and then turn around and do his own thing. But his self-centeredness and his lack of faith led to a lot of bad decisions. Foolishness. On the other hand, you have Jonathan, who knew what needed to be done. And he trusted God. And he did it. He had complete confidence that God was able to do anything. And that God would do what was best. Now I can ask that question again, straightforward. So are you a person of faith or a person of foolishness? The problem with that question is that we would probably, if we're honest, we would all answer a little bit of both. We have times when we act in faith, and we have times when we are kind of foolish, when we don't obey, when we don't live in faith. You see, it's a growing process. It's a process of becoming more Christ-like and becoming more faith-filled. And so the question I really want to ask is this: are you learning faith? And are you learning to trust in God? And are you growing in those things? Are you learning to act upon faith in God, not just in what you see in front of you? You see, God is not limited by our limited resources. But we tend to trust, and this is the crazy thing, we tend to trust in what? Our limited resources, rather than our unlimited God. We tend to trust in ourselves rather than God. And we tend to look out for our own interests rather than seeking what God wants. And in doing so, we may, just like Saul, be missing out on good things that God wants to bless us with. You see, it could be better if we live by faith. Not just reacting to our circumstances, but live by faith. And live for God's honor. Not your own, not my own, but for God's honor. You can live with complete confidence in God. Because nothing is impossible for God. And we know that he is good. So live by faith. Trust in